Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. And before I introduce our second and final speaker, Vladimir, for today, I just wanted to make a few comments because after his talk, we will be going into the Om Choir and ending. So wanted just to remind everybody that this retreat does continue next week. It'll be both June 19th and 20th, Saturday and Sunday, exact same timing. We will have all four speakers with us and about a 90-minute, 75 to 90-minute Q&A session. So please be sure to join us. And around Tuesday or Wednesday, midweek, we'll be sending out a link to all those that registered that will have this weekend's recordings in case you wanted to re-listen or if you missed any of the sessions. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko, who has an MA in Sanskrit language and general and theoretical linguistics. He also has a PhD in Indian philosophy. Vladimir is a researcher and instructor in the field of Vedic and Vedantic studies, Indian philosophy, psychology of language, and of course, integral yoga and integral yoga psychology. Vladimir's topic today is In Search of Human Unity. And as always, please be posting any questions you have for Vladimir in the Q&A box. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Vladimir.
Thank you, Radha. Right, the topic is profound and of course it goes far beyond our knowledge. As Sri Aurobindo beautifully starts his ideal of human unity, actually the work he wrote for several years in the period of Arya, and then he was finishing it already in 1949. He was still reviewing this work. By the way, I want to mention here, Narad is here, that Narad is recording and we are creating the audio book from A Human Cycle, An Ideal of Human Unity. So it will be available in the form of, audio book. You could listen to it and read simultaneously, which is very helpful. So Sri Aurobindo starts his ideal of human unity with this puzzling statement: nothing is more obscure to humanity or less seized by its understanding, whether in the power that moves it or the sense of the aim towards which it moves, than its own communal and collective life. And I think it is very valuable to say we do not really understand how we live socially. What is social consciousness? And it requires certain dwelling. And what I discovered, I wanted to share with you today, my discovery is that the unity, human unity, which we associate with the social network or with the communal life, is actually starting with individual. And unless individual is united, as it were, yukta in Sanskrit language, yoked, composed, the human unity on the bigger scale is impossible. So I start with my outcome of my speech, the result of what I arrived at. And now we will look into it. How is that and why it is so? What are the constituent parts of ourselves which we have to unite around the inner center in order to be united on the bigger scale in society? So there are several layers upon layers, structures of consciousness or paradigms, starting from the Vedic times, where they speak about this composition of our will, of our action, word, and mind, or of our karma, action, our heart, devotion, and our mind. And we can see that this triple nature of ourselves is constituted in our bigger bodies, in our social life also. So I wanted to start with the ancient hymn of the Rigveda. which is called the Hymn of Unity, by the way. And it is the last hymn of the Rigveda from 10th Mandala 191, which sounds in this way. Sam idyuvase vrishanagne vishvanyarya ilaspade samidhyase sanovasuni abhara. Samgajadvam, samvadadvam, samvomanansi janatam, devabhagam yatha purve, sanjanana upasate. Samano mantrak samitih samani, samanam manah sahachittamesham, samanam mantram abhimantrayevah, samanena vo havisha juhomi. Samani va akutih, samana hridayani vaha, samanam astu vomano yathavah susahasati. So you constantly hear this sama. Sama means actually same, together. And the hymn starts even with sam idyuvase. The rishi is called Samvanana. Samvanana is coming together in joy. It's kind of amazing. And it starts together, you unite. O Lord of flame divine, unite all in the absolute unity together for the noble one, for the one who seeks this unity. You're totally kindled in the place of the truth, that place of the truth which was spoken today by Alok so beautifully. In the heart there is the flame. Bring to us our luminous treasures.
So, Vladimir, I don't know if you can hear, but you've frozen.
I'm frozen.
Up there. Just give him a minute to change internet.
I will unfroze and freeze. Let me try to change. Do you hear me now? Is it now better? No? Can you hear me? Yeah? Great.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I was just on my way up.
Okay, I changed the we have several connections and some of them sometimes work and sometimes not.
You ended with together.
All right.
And then we separated.
And then we got cut off, yes. Yes, that is the big challenge, to be together. How to be together? So it seems that we cannot be together on the scale of ego. With ego guiding our life, togetherness becomes impossible. Simply to say, because it doesn't look for the fulfillment of the higher life. It doesn't look for the fulfillment of everyone. And that is the major characteristic of Indian tradition and philosophy. You know, how many mantras we have, Sarvesham Swastir Bhavatu, may there be well-being of everyone. Sarvesham Shantir Bhavatu, may be there peace of everyone. Purnam Bhavatu, may there be fulfillment and perfection of everyone. And Mangalam, auspiciousness of everyone. Why of everyone? Why not only of my friends or my country or my family or my chosen ones? Not of everyone. And this is the beautiful message. The same in the Veda, starts from the Veda. I wanted to look into the Vedic hymn first. Why it is the last hymn of the Rigveda, message to humanity. And it is called the Hymn of Unity. It's amazing. So what is to be united? Let us look into it again. I will read. So together again. Yes. O Lord, O divine flame, and the divine flame, according to Sri Aurobindo, is the divine will within the nature, which is rising and pushing the whole nature forward in evolutionary movement towards higher consciousness. Unite all in the absolute unity. Some, Idyuva say, together you unite all the beings for the noble one. And the noble one, according to Sri Aurobindo, is the one who seeks the divine realization. You are totally kindled in the place of the truth. Ilaspade samidhyase. So it is that place of the truth which Alok was mentioning, that flame in the heart, which we all have to align our life with. Bring to us our luminous treasures. So there are many treasures to be brought to us from within and from without, once they are aligned with our inner being. And then, look at this message. Samgajadvam, go together. Samvadadvam, speak together. Samvomanansi janatam. May your thoughts be together. So, in the movement, in the will, in the action, be together. In the speech, in the expression of our inner being, be together. And may your thoughts also come together. Deva bhagam yatha purve, as the first gods assumed their share in this creation, sat fully agreeing with each other together. At the first sacrifice, every godhead received its share of delight. So they agreed to take that share, to take that particular note in this greater concert of this symphony of manifestation. So in that way, you have to agree and be together, go together, speak together. May your minds be together. Samano mantrach samitich samani, samanam manach sahachittam esham, uniting in their word, uniting in their gathering, uniting in their minds. These gods who have one consciousness, saha, manach sahachittam esham, one consciousness. Samanam mantrach abhimantrayevam. It is this uniting word that I speak to you now. It is with this uniting offering of yours that I offer. Samanena bohavisha johomi. With the common offering, with this satsang where all the noble souls come together and offer their particular participation and delight in this manifestation into one yagya. Samaniva akutich. May your will in the body be uniting. Samana hridayani vaha. May your aspirations in the hearts be uniting. Samanam astuvomano. And may your minds be uniting. Yathavach susahasati, as in your common well-being together. And these are the last words of the Rigveda. As in your common well-being together. What can be greater than such a song, such a hymn to the divine? And notice, please, that all the elements of ourselves, of our beings, of our mind, of our speech word which is rising from the heart according to the Rigveda. It is that word of Brihaspati, that wave from the ocean heart which is reaching out, leaping out to manifest the truth of the inner being, that sweetness of the hymn which is rising to heaven and takes the fire of our aspiration up to heaven to unite with this, with the Surya, with the Aditya, with the luminosity of our mind. So these three have to be united within ourselves as individuals, and then these three constituents will become united in our social life. This is my discovery. To be capable of united with others, one has to be first united oneself. One has to unite one's will with one word, with one's mind. The mind and the heart have to go together. This is our biggest difficulty. What we feel, what we love and want is different from what we know. And it is different from what we say. And it is different from what we will and do. So we are disunited. And we have to put it all together around the inner center. This is the basic message of the Rigveda. Now, when we go farther away from the Rigveda, we will see that Upanishads speak in the same way about the unity. There will be 3 sections which have to be united through the faculties of consciousness. When we come to the Gita, we see that there are 3 major movements: karma, yoga, bhakti yoga, the yoga of the heart, and jnana yoga, the yoga of the mind. And they all have to be composed. And they are constituting that harmonious unity of the being. Aurobindo beautifully describes these 3 steps in the essays on the Gita. Let me quote from it. Read his explanation. The first step is karma yoga, the selfless sacrifice of works. And here the Gita's insistence is on action. The second is jnana yoga, the self-realization and knowledge of the true nature of the self and the world. The true nature of the self and the world. And here the insistence is on knowledge. But the sacrifice of work continues, and the path of works becomes one with, but does not disappear into the path of knowledge. So it is one with path of knowledge, but at the same time, it has its own unique characteristic. The action, the will, is joining the knowledge. The will becomes knowledgeable. The will and knowledge go together. The power and consciousness are connected. And the last step is bhakti yoga, adoration and seeking of the Supreme Self as the divine being. And here the insistence is on devotion. But the knowledge is not subordinated, only raised, vitalized, and fulfilled. And still the sacrifice of works continues. The double path becomes the true way of knowledge, works, and devotion. And the fruit of the sacrifice, the one fruit still placed before the seeker, is attained: union with the divine being and oneness with the supreme divine nature. This is the union. This is the unity. And the human unity is actually this attainment, this concept in disguise. We speak about the human unity as if it is something common, but truly speaking, it is a unique achievement where all the beings are open to the truth of themselves and others, and it is not easily realizable. So, what is interesting that the same ideals we find in French Revolution and American Revolution. As you know, liberty, equality, and fraternity. And Aurobindo wrote on it quite an extensive notes. Let me read some of them. Why they are so important, these 3 major movements of our nature, of our inner nature. Liberty. Today, liberty is known to us as liberalism of some kind. Yeah, it's a kind of philosophy of free will, of all possible achievements on the individual scale. Of course, there is neoliberalism, which is in Scandinavian countries well known nowadays. There is pseudo-liberalism and democracy, which we can find in China and Russia and other countries. But I'm not going into those details. I'm looking into the principles. Man needs freedom, says Aurobindo, freedom of thought and life and action in order that he may grow. Otherwise, he will remain fixed where he was, a stunted and static being. So the freedom is the first condition of our growth, freedom of individual will. Now, equality. What is this equality about? Equality, it's more something which man realizes that he needs an organization of nature in a particular way where all his individual liberty can be exercised. So we all have to have equal rights, freedom of speech, of religion, of cultural, political, racial background, ecological. There are many freedoms which we must have in the society. So certainly, says Aurobindo, absolute equality is non-existent in this world. But the word was aimed against the unjust and unnecessary inequalities of the old social order. But it has actually reverted to the old notion of an absolute efficient state, no longer monarchical, aristocratic, but secular, democratic, and socialistic, with liberty sacrificed to the need of equality and aggregate efficiency. Perhaps, says Aurobindo, liberty and equality, liberty and authority, liberty and organized efficiency can never be quite satisfactorily reconciled, so long as man, individual, and aggregate lives by egoism, so long as he cannot undergo a great spiritual and psychological change and rise beyond mere communal association to that third ideal which some vague inner sense made the revolutionary thinkers of France add to their watchwords of liberty and equality, the greatest of all the three, though till now only an empty word on man's lips, the ideal of fraternity, or less sentimentally and more truly expressed, an inner oneness. An inner oneness is to be realized first. That no mechanism, social, political, religious, has ever created or can create, it must take birth in the soul and rise from hidden and divine depths within. When Aurobindo speaks about fraternity or brotherhood, the psychic quality of love, it is this love which can balance the freedom of individual will with the arrangement in society. Only through love that we can manage these two different opposites of our nature, between our will and knowledge, between power and consciousness. Power and consciousness can be harmonized by love, by bliss. And when he speaks about brotherhood, about this fraternity, he says, very interestingly, he describes it as 3 steps of Vishnu. He says that in the nature, the family, it was first realization of this love, unconditional love towards one's family, one's mother and father, one's offspring, children, unconditional love. But that is not enough. It's a kind of limited sphere. It has to grow. And the second step would be the growth into the nation. And he speaks about nation souls, where the psychic beings could communicate in intimate and subtle manner with other psychic beings, not limited to their families. I remember this experience which I had when I came back to Russia after many years. And I was in the cafe, and I ordered some food and coffee, and it was so interesting that I could communicate with the waiter in a very subtle manner, and that subtlety in jokes and joy was understood and communicated easily. It was done through language, through this affinity in the national culture. So Aurobindo describes these two major characteristics of this nation as the land and the language. Language is the carrier of our psychic capacity to communicate subtleties through the word to other psychic beings. So this is the conditionings which we have to go through. And there is a question in the universities today quite a lot in the Europe, especially in the Oslo University. There is the whole project. They want to understand why there is a rising of national interest is taking place in the world. All over the world, all the nations are become self-aware, as it is in Europe. Aurobindo beautifully describes this process in the human cycle, how the nations are formed. But these are the formations on earth of a particular force, which is actually typal force, but supports the psychic beings and their development in a particular culture, in a particular framework. It's like a school. If family is a kindergarten, then the school, the secondary school, is the nation. And finally, the human unity, when we are prepared to love people unconditionally, which are not connected to your family, and to have with them deeper relations of love and joy, then we will be able to step into the human unity. That's why the development of national cultures are so important. So, if you look at these three, karma, bhakti, and jnana yoga, and these would be the three major constituents of our Purna yoga, of integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo. He builds his integral yoga on these three major constituents. The development of will, which is joining the knowledge, leads us to self-realization of self-knowledge and world knowledge. And finally, that realization leads us and reveals within us the true being, the divine being which loves every other being. And that is Bhakti Yoga. And it is quite interesting if you look at the Gita. Gita is built in these three sections. The first section is Karma Kanda, the section of Karma Yoga, first 6 chapters, then Bhakti Yoga, which belongs to our heart level, and finally Jnana Yoga, which belongs to our mind level, in the head and above. We see the same three major movements in the Rigveda, where there is Agni, which is rising from the depths of our inconscient, the immortal among mortals, as it were, the fire, the son of Rudra, the divine, the supreme, which holds on his shoulders the whole nature. Then there is Brihaspati, the flame rising from the depth of our heart, of our ocean heart, the honey wave of the ocean heart, which frames this aspiration of fire and allows it to reach to heaven. And finally, heaven, Vishnu. And these three, Rudra, Brihaspati, and Vishnu, are known later in the Hinduism as Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahman. Yes, as the creator, destroyer, and sustainer. We have the same ideal in Brahmanas and Aranyakas and Upanishads of unity of Agni, Vayu, and Surya, three essential energies of the divine. They have to be united, and that is the purpose of the sacrifice. We speak about these three all the time in our integral yoga as physical, mental, and vital consciousness, and behind the vital consciousness we have a psychic presence, yes, which has to illumine the vital. We speak about these three as earth, heaven, and space in between in the Rigveda. And even if we look at the development of other forms of knowledge, such as spiral dynamics or Gebser's work on ever-present origin, we will see that all of them are aiming at this new quality where all the layers of our consciousness will be efficiently engaged and interacting, not deficiently, but efficiently. So we can look at spiral dynamics and see how one by one the memes are evolving from very, how to say, let me see whether I have my slides here. Oh, I will not use slides anyhow. Starting from red, blue, and orange memes, moving towards red meme is more egocentric, where you assert yourself egoistically and try to survive in nature. And then blue meme is more like opposite to it, authority of some kind, which is imposed on you by society. And then orange meme, you move out of it to some kind of exchange of goods and consumerism and so on. And then you move into the higher level of green meme, where you have already sharing and feeling and consensus and community, sense of community, which we are now in the green meme. And then finally you move into yellow, integral meme, where there are already self-principles, principles of equality, of human rights, of knowledge, and finally turquoise meme or holistic. So even in these not connected to integral yoga structures, we will see the same evolution and development of the same thought, how to reach the most transparent way of being. In the Gebser's terms, he calls it diaphaneity, the transparency, where all the structures will be transparently present and contributing to one overall more complex consciousness. He starts with archaic consciousness, where the being and consciousness are one and they are not yet split, and then magic structure of consciousness, where our nature is like in the animal kingdom is one and the same with us. There is no yet separation on inner and outer nature. In Aboriginal tribes, you can see this, that they are totally identified with the nature they live in. And finally, we move to the mythical structure, where there is an awareness, the inner awareness, which distinguishes itself from the outer being and points us back to our origin, tells us that we are not from this world, that we have somewhere the source, the origin we have to return to. And then finally, the mental structure. So the mythical structure brings the word, the myth, the story, the myth of creation, and we believe in that myth, and we orient ourselves to find our inner being, our soul within, which is contradicting to the nature outside, whereas the mental structure is reconciling between the two and brings back the mythical structure, but we are already formed as individual beings. And mental structure, rational structure, is very critical and destructive for the nature. It's very egoistic in its character, and it has a very short span of, according to Gebser, of life, because if it will be longer, it will destroy all nature. So it's very critical. It does not permit any other structure to shine through. But what it does, it reorients our inner search towards the future. And that was what it does. And then, after the mental structure, three-dimensional structure of consciousness, comes integral structure, where all these magic, mythical, and mental will be efficiently contributing to the overall functioning of our consciousness. Gebser was one of the ashramites, by the way. He came to ashram in 1956. He lived there, and what is interesting, it's a very rare case, some of you may know, that after he wrote his magnum opus, the ever-present origin, in the beginning of 40s, he didn't know about Sri Aurobindo that time. Later in life, he recognized the influence of Sri Aurobindo onto him to write this book. It was an occult influence, and he admits this in his letters. And he comes to the ashram and he meets the mother in 56. He lived for 1.5 years there in the ashram. And he says that the mother represents the integral structure of consciousness of the future. And this is quite interesting. So it's about how to compose ourselves, how to become united around the inner center, how to unite our mind, our heart, and our will around the divine center. And that is the answer to the human unity in the social structure. At this, I may stop and open for questions. If there are some, it would be nice to address them. Or if you have some ideas you would like to share, so please.
And you've got a couple questions in there, Vladimir.
Right, I can see. Yes, thank you for questions. Do you know of Sri Aurobindo Center in Moscow? Yes, there is a Sri Aurobindo Center in Moscow. There are several people there. There are several centers, by the way, and I will give you some information, yes, later. Do you see a nation culture developing in India? Sri Aurobindo pointed out somewhere that without Sanatana Dharma, Bharata would cease to be Bharata. I am paraphrasing. Yes, it's a very, very interesting question, because there are certain cultures, such as India, or United States for that matter, or even Russia, Russian Federation, where you will find that they are, in a way, India is unique anyway. You cannot compare it to Russia or United States. It is unique for one particular reason. India has Vedas. It started from the Vedic vision of oneness, or from the Vedic rishis, and developed the whole culture, spiritual culture, over several structures of consciousness, starting from archaic and ending with mental, and still it is there. And there is one particular language which unites this development. It is Sanskrit language. Everything was communicated within one language. All the shifts of structures of consciousness over the period of more than 6,000 years. It's a unique culture. So in that sense, of course, Sanatana Dharma is something very special for India. And as Mother says, India represents a psychic being on Earth. If Earth is a psychic being in the universe, then India is the psychic being on Earth, which represents our soul. And in that sense, of course, India is unique and cannot be compared with any national structure in that sense. Nation, even Sanskrit doesn't have the name of nation. It's not an Indian language. It does not belong to some kind of like Tamil or Hindi or Gujarati. It is Sanskritam, means perfected. It's perfect. Yeah, it is the means of communication with the gods, with the divine powers. But there are other cultures which are quite interesting, such as Russian Federation, which has more than 100 nationalities and still tries to manage all of them, imposing on them one particular language. The same was done in China, by the way. It's some kind of socialistic approach to development, uniformity rather than unity. In China, from the Qin dynasty, the emperor, it is 5th century AD, imposed one language on the whole China, and all other cultures were destroyed and killed. To have this uniformity, to make it more powerful culture, country. So in a way, this kind of attempt of uniformity was there all the time. It is actually a spiritual achievement which will become in the future possible. But before, there has to be that intimate, subtle connection between human beings developed. Once it is not developed, how could we really even dare to think that we could have unity? We can imitate the unity. We can learn to behave in a proper way as if we love others, as if we respect them. But within ourselves, we do not have that affinity. We do not have the real feeling for others. To develop that real feeling, the development of national culture is indispensable. And we can see this in Europe. In Norway, for example, for National Day of Norway, all the youngsters, they take and they put national forms, very expensive, very embroidery, very beautiful, garments, national garments. Youngsters, 16 years old, they come out, they play, they sing, they play national games and so on and so forth. It's amazing to see this happiness of belonging to a particular nation and feeling that unique environment in which you are loved and understood, without even words. So this development is a stage which we cannot omit, and it will take its place in the development of human beings. There is another question here. In evolution of nature, which unity she will preserve? I don't understand. Okay, in the evolution of nature, which unity she will preserve? Family, marriage, nation, continent, planet, and create new one. There are stages. I think these are the 3 steps which Aurobindo defined. It's first the family and clan, or in the animal kingdom you have these, the flocks and groups of animals which are ready to give their individual life to save the group. This is already realized in nature, but in the nation where all kinds of human beings are part of, would be difficult to realize this unity. So it requires certain development, and it takes time. It takes long time to develop the nation, at least 1,000 years. So family is already what we realized in nature, but a nation is the next step, and then human unity. The human unity will preserve the nations. The nations are like unique flowers in this bouquet of different flowers. Yes, they maybe not all of them roses and lotuses. There could be some, flowers from the field, some insignificant small blue, nobody could even notice, but they add to this fragrance and to this beauty and the complexity of relations, and they have to be preserved and nurtured and valued. That's the vision. They will create a much greater variety and depth of love towards the divine. Divine doesn't want to be uniformal, that everybody is the same and everybody understands the same way. We have to understand the world differently, and in that difference there is a unique ananda, a unique joy which we are looking for. Please discuss further how Sri Aurobindo was an influence in Gebser's psychological perspective. Maybe it would be, kind of important to dedicate to Gebser some separate session. Maybe we will do it in our study group or something, because Gebser is really worth studying and looking into. From the point of view of Sri Aurobindo's perspective, yes, and his influence on him. I can see that influence. I can see in the choices he made in his book, the ever-present origin. It's named like this. The ever-present origin is always there. And whatever structures are developed, the ever-present origin is staying through them, combining them, uniting them, and at the end reveals itself as integral structure, where all of them become efficient contributors to the complexity of our life. There are more questions here. Your clarity around the shared understanding that comes through national culture is so well expressed. If the rise of interest in nationhood does rise in part from a societal fear of the impact of immigration, how can we as individuals help bring understanding and cooperation? Oops, you're already answering that, I think. Yes, so sorry to read, because I didn't read them before, so I read them on the fly. Yes, immigration and yes, we have to distinguish between the nation and national spirit, nation soul, and genetic inheritance, as it were. Genetically, we may be from different races. There can be a person from China who will be pure Norwegian. Or person from Africa who will become pure French. There is a fundamental difference between genetic fundamental nature development of the structure, and the spirit which comes and inhabits that particular formation. So it is not genetically connected. And this was the biggest mistake which was made in the socialism, or this, national socialism of Hitler, and because he thought that that would be connected genetically, that genetically we have to grow the nation which will be all uniformal and understand each other in a pure sense. By the way, his plan was to destroy all the Germans also. He was already trying to grow a new particular race. He was selecting human beings for that particular Aryan race, which he was in laboratories, he was trying to grow. It's incredible what he was planning. He was genetically trying to modify the whole Earth development. But the spirit, the national spirit, is not genetically connected. It has its own domain in the spirit. Somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, and what if the ground is destroyed and the nation is destroyed or assimilated by other nation? Nobody speaks the language anymore. There is no unique self-expression of that nature. There is no land. There is no culture anymore. It's absorbed by other culture. What happens to the spirit? And Sri Aurobindo says, then the spirit of that nation withdraws to its origin. It's amazing. It is there. It is there. It tried to support the development, but if it is not welcome on the ground, it withdraws back to the origin. So there is much to learn from this, which we do not know and don't understand totally. So there is another question. This type of Gurukul teaching is missing from the current Indian educational system. Do you see a resurgence of these teachings of the Vedas, etc., within Indian educational system? I think in India there are many gurukuls nowadays. India still continues as if nothing happened. It's amazing. I made films of it. I visited many gurukuls. It's quite unique. It's very difficult to stop this kind of groove. Yeah, it's the culture which was established over thousands of years. You cannot just cut it off. In the cities, yes, they are not known, but in the villages and beyond cities, there are many gurukulas which are trying to continue and learn by heart in the same traditional way, Vedas. But the gurukulas were meant to preserve the text. First of all, their first task was to learn by heart all the Vedas and pass it forward to future generations without any distortion. I think we need another kind of gurukuls where we would be, like our satsang or retreat centers, modern gurukuls where people can come together and learn from each other and invite those, developed human beings to lead us and to share their knowledge with us. This would be a new form. To go backward is not possible. I don't think it would work. I think it would exhaust itself eventually. Or it will change its form. I'm not sure yet. But the question is quite challenging. Great. Do I have one? Or my time is up?
No, you actually, we did some of the announcements early, so you can go till just a little bit before 1. I see DJ has a question down there,
Okay.
and then nodded if when he comes back also wanted to, oh, there he is, also wanted to ask you a question.
Sure, please. Narad, please. If you're...
I have a few things to cover.
Yes, please, go ahead.
One is Mother to Sat Prem, when she says there has to be a new universal language. What do you understand about that in relation to Sanskrit, which is India's language, no doubt? Mother mentions that it could be possibly closer to the American system, and then she says, oh, what do you feel about that? An international language understood by all peoples.
Putting challenging questions. Yes, it's a very challenging question because we do not know what she saw in the future. She saw something coming. She knows that there will be a shift. And when Satprem tried to bring this, would that be Sanskrit? She didn't say yes. Mm-hmm. Though she studied Sanskrit herself and she supported and she spoke about this, she mentioned this as simple but not simplified Sanskrit, simple, related to its roots, to this etymology of the roots, where the roots are understood in their colors, qualities, from which we can derive and build many words. This capacity of a higher mind we have to acquire in the future. But in general, what would be the future language? Where will there be one language for all of us? I'm not even sure. Just think about it. All these national cultures develop their unique languages, unique ways of expressing themselves. It's like different flowers, different ways of seeing the world, different colors, different hues, different characters. Each character, each nation has a particular character. You can see Frenchies are very particular. Because they have developed this character which we recognize. They behave differently. They think differently about the world and themselves. Then we compare it to Americans or to Russians. You meet Russians, they will speak and they will see the world very different. So there will be always something, some adjustment which is precious for the divine. And I don't think the divine is in a hurry to abolish all that and to leave behind. I think there will be some development of that.
Thank you. My second point is about, you mentioned flowers. So it's about the flower of the hydrangea, which Mother has named collective harmony. But she comments on it and she says collective harmony is the work undertaken by the divine consciousness. It alone has the power to realize it. How do we get this collective harmony unless we are all totally attuned to the divine?
What I understood by this before, I was thinking about it, and I will tell you my understanding, that there is already a formation made by the Supreme for our future development, which was never taking place before, and it is awaiting its time. So
wonderful. Thank you.
Hmm.
The last is sort of a question about two Russians. My friend Dmitry von Morenschild told me once that the greatest visionary he had ever known was Archaka. Could you say anything about Archaka?
I don't know anything about Archaka. Who is the, unfortunately?
There's one small book by him of his visions of the future.
Yeah, I should read and then I will know something about it. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
So there are more questions. There is a DJ is asking, very well said about equality, the division of America. What role should we play to bring unity, equality? Yes, this is a challenging situation, very challenging. By the way, look at this beautiful answer which Aurobindo prepared for us. From one side, liberalism, and from other side, equality. One is more liberal, that means whatever I will, it goes. The other, whatever the arrangement of social equality and equanimity is required, I will do. Look at this. One is more capitalistic, as it were. Other is more socialistic. One is more, you have the party which is daring to self-assert itself, and other is trying to reconcile and to make everybody benefit, and more socialistic in its nature. So you have these two parties. Look at them. They are just fitting perfectly into this vision of freedom of will and, initiative and self-assertion and moving forward and fighting for whatever you believe. And other is taking care of others and building the social system of justice and this and that. And they are in a seeming contradiction because our nature is in this contradiction between our will to be and the equality of all things to be accepted and embraced as divine. So here we are. And both are needed. And that is the beauty of it. Both are needed and both are in the dynamic duo. This is the dynamic duo. I think that made the US a unique country because it creates this dynamism which no other country created in this particular way. These two parties contradicting. And that contradiction is actually creative and should be welcomed.
And maybe just one more question, Vladimir.
Right. I do not know whether it is the answer, but for me it makes kind of sense. If you want to add something, please be do it. Do you think that this is what happened to Maya culture and its spirit retreat to its origin? I think so. I think so. Many cultures, spirits withdrew from the manifestation. They went into their own fields and they may not come back unless, of course, the carriers would bring them back. If there is somewhere, in some form, some people are left and want to revive that connection with that spirit, they may do so. But there is very little chance for them because there is no support. Great. And do you think Sanskrit will resurge? I think so. I totally believe so. There is no other way, and it will come back. It's a profound and unique instrument of the spirit. And the more we move into the spiritual realm, the more it will come back. You will see it, and it is happening already. It is happening in Europe. Germany is inviting back. It's in every university. Sanskrit is revived, which was not the case 10 years back. Thank you.